Hello and welcome back. Across the UK, dozens of prisons have been shuttered over the past century, some quietly decommissioned, others closed because of controversy, reform or decay. These institutions, once central to the machinery of justice, now stand as relics of shifting penal philosophies, changing political priorities and evolving public attitudes towards incarceration. Today we look at two of these closed prisons and their former inmates, starting with Bullwood Hall Prison. Bullwood Hall was a former women's prison in Essex, known for its troubled history, evolving role and eventual closure in 2013. It began as a prison for young female offenders and later became a Category C adult prison, reflecting broader shifts in the UK's policies. Bullwood Hall opened in the early 1960s in Hockley, Essex, as a closed female prison, a type of youth detention centre designed to rehabilitate young women aged 16 to 21. Built at a cost of £300,000, it replaced older prisons in Durham, Manchester and Cardiff. The institution quickly gained a reputation as a tough girls' facility, with frequent reports of violence, damaged cells and unrest among inmates. By the 1980s, Bullwood Hall transitioned into a full-fledged adult women's prison, eventually housing up to 248 inmates. It was designated a Category C prison, meaning it held prisoners who could not be trusted in open conditions, but were unlikely to try escape. Despite its expanded role, the prison continued to struggle with poor conditions and limited resources. A 2005 report condemned Bullwood Hall for still using the practice of slopping out. A year later, the prison was singled out for its high levels of inmates trying to take their own life and self-harm. Bullwood Hall continued to serve as a women's prison until 2006, when it was announced that it would be converted into a Category C male prison due to a shortage of male prison places. On the 10th of January 2013, it was announced by the government that it would be one of 7 British prisons to be closed. The prison closed on Thursday, the 28th of March 2013. In November 2015, there was outline planning proposals submitted to redevelop the site for residential use, including 60 homes. Now the history has been done, let's head straight into the former inmates, starting with Tracie Andrews, who took the life of her fiancé Lee Harvey in 1996, then staged a false road rage story to cover it up. Her case shocked the UK and remains a chilling example of manipulation and domestic violence. She grew up in a turbulent household in England, marked by early emotional instability and family conflict, factors that may have shaped her later behaviour and relationships. Born in 1969, Tracie Andrews was the middle child of 3 siblings, with additional half-siblings from her parents' later relationships. Her parents had a volatile relationship, frequently arguing before separating when Andrews was just 6 years old. She grew up in the West Midlands, and while details of her schooling and early social life are limited, accounts suggest she struggled with emotional regulation and interpersonal conflict from a young age. Andrews had a history of intense and unstable relationships, often marked by jealousy and aggression. In October 1994, she began a relationship with a local man named Lee Harvey, moving in with him 3 months after they met. Their off-again, on-again relationship was marked by instability, with both being possessive and jealous of each other's relations with other men and women. The couple frequently argued, which sometimes escalated into violence and led to the police being summoned. Her relationship with Lee Harvey was described by friends and family as turbulent, with frequent arguments and emotional outbursts. Witnesses later testified to Andrews' controlling behaviour and mood swings. In the months leading up to Lee Harvey's murder, the couple had split and reconciled multiple times, with Andrews displaying erratic behaviour and making threats during arguments. Harvey had confided in both his friends and his own mother regarding Andrews' emotional problems. Police were called to the house in late October 1996, just over a month before Lee was murdered. after discovering that Andrews had bitten Harvey on the neck on one occasion. Harvey's mother told him that they should separate for the sake of his daughter. Other family members of Harvey warned against him pursuing a relationship with Andrews, and Andrews' mother also told her daughter not to continue their flawed relationship. On the night of the 1st of December 1996, Andrews stabbed Lee Harvey during an encounter on a quiet country lane. The attack was exceedingly violent. Forensic accounts and reporting described numerous wounds inflicted in a frenzied assault. Instead of immediately confessing, Andrews constructed a detailed story that Harvey had been the victim of a road rage attack by two men, and she publicly appealed for information about these supposed perpetrators. She claimed a car had followed her and Harvey, and that two men from the car had confronted and attacked them after stopping them on a country lane. In reality, Andrews had taken the life of Lee Harvey using a penknife and leaving him with 42 wounds. Harvey's sister later said she knew from the time she was told about the murder that Andrews had killed him. At a press conference on the 3rd of December 1996, Andrews elaborated on the supposed attack, saying that a fat man with staring eyes had taken the life of Lee Harvey after getting out of a Ford Sierra in which he was a passenger. The couple's car had stopped near a cottage, and the commotion had alerted a male resident living meters away who discovered Harvey on the road with Andrews standing by him. He immediately ran back to his house to call the emergency services. Police noted that Harvey's car had apparently not stopped on the road in any hurry, but had been neatly parked on the side of the road. Police quickly found inconsistencies between Andrews' account and forensic evidence. Witness statements, physical evidence from the scene, and inconsistencies in her behaviour and timeline all undermined the road rage narrative. Her highly visible media appearances, including an emotional public plea, became part of the case against her when investigators and prosecutors argued the performances were calculated attempts to mislead the public and obstruct justice. Andrews seemed to contradict her original statement, giving different times to her original story, and police had to step in and stop her while she told her story to the press. Police also noted that Andrews had a lot to say for a person who was supposedly in shock. After the press conference, police began to question Andrews' story. A witness statement from a child in a cottage said she could clearly hear an argument between a man and a woman after the car had parked up that night. The police did not find any evidence that a second car had overtaken Lee Harvey's car to stop it before the attack. In Harvey's hand were found more than 80 strands of Andrews' hair, which pathologists determined would have had to been taken from her head with considerable force, i.e. through a physical struggle. Most notably, two witnesses came forward after Andrews' press conference to say that they had seen Harvey's white Ford Escort car driving past them on the lane Harvey was murdered on that night, but that no car was following it and that no other cars had been seen by them on that lane that evening. With suspicion mounting on Andrews, she attempted to take her own life the day after the press conference by taking pills. Andrews' attempt and the confirmation that no road rage incident could have occurred convinced police of the need to arrest her. She was still in hospital 2 days later when police first arrested her and questioned her about the murder. After being discharged from hospital, she was charged with the murder of Lee Harvey on the 19th of December 1996 and released on bail. Police then discovered a penknife-shaped stain, an impression in Andrews' boot, convincing police that she had carried the murder weapon in her boot after the murder and had disposed of it at hospital. Andrews had spent long periods of time in the toilet at the hospital for unknown reasons, apparently to dispose of the weapon. In July 1997, Andrews stood trial for murder. The prosecution presented evidence of a volatile relationship. The forensic picture at at the scene and the deliberate fabrication of the road rage story. The jury found Andrews guilty and she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that she serve at least 14 years. Andrews appealed the sentence, claiming that she was the victim of a miscarriage of justice because of the damaging publicity surrounding her case. In October 1998, the appeal was denied. Andrews was released in July 2011. She was banned from travelling within 25 miles of her victim's family without supervision. When plans to release her were announced, a fellow female inmate and former prison lover of Andrews said that Andrews had continued to act possessively and aggressively in a relationship while in prison, revealing that Andrews had attacked her after seeing her speaking with her ex-girlfriend. The woman said she was opposed to Andrews' release and warned she would kill again. After her release, Andrews changed her name to Tia Carter and altered her appearance, undergoing £5,000 worth of surgery through the NHS to change the shape of her distinctive jaw, and later changed her name again to Jenna Stevens Goldsworthy. In 2017, she married bouncer Phil Goldsworthy. Lee Harvey's relatives publicly expressed continuing distress and anger at her release, and the case remains a touchstone in discussions about sentencing, parole, and the emotional dimensions of closure for families bereaved by intimate violence. Next, we look at sisters Lisa and Michelle Taylor. They were two sisters at the centre of one of Britain's most publicised murder trials of the early 1990s. They were convicted in 1992 for the killing of 21-year-old Alison Shaughnessy, who had her life taken in the stairwell of her flat near Clapham Junction on the 3rd of June 1991. The victim, Alison, was born Alison Blackmore in London in 1969 and was raised in the city as part of a large Irish family. In 1986, she was working as a clerk at Barclays Bank in London and met her future husband, John Shaughnessy. He worked at the Churchill Clinic in Lambeth and had recently immigrated from Ireland. The couple became engaged in April 1989 and married on the 23rd of June 1990 in Piltown. Among the guests at the wedding was Michelle Taylor, a work friend of John, recorded on video being kissed by him on the cheek. Michelle and John lived in the same staff accommodation at the Churchill Clinic, 2 rooms apart from each other. After their wedding, Alison moved into her husband's staff accommodation. John and Michelle spent more and more time together after the wedding, and this started to be noticed by others. In January 1991, John and Alison moved to 41 Vardens Row in Battersea. On the 3rd of June 1991, Alison finished work at 5 p.m. as usual and made her way home to Vardens Road. She had told colleagues that she was planning to soon have children with John. She wanted to move away with John to Ireland to start a family there. Later that evening, John was given a lift home from the Churchill Clinic to the flat by Michelle Taylor. Michelle came in with him supposedly because she wanted to say hello to Alison, and at 8:30 p.m. they entered, revealing Alison had had her life taken. She had been attacked and had 54 wounds. John was found to have a cast-iron alibi for the murder, having been at work at the time, and so was eliminated from inquiries. Police inquiries quickly established that John and Michelle Taylor were having an affair at the time of the murder. Michelle later said he was her first true love. Alison had not been aware of the affair, although she strongly disliked Michelle. It was discovered that John had spent the night before his wedding to Alison having S with Michelle, and Michelle later claimed that they had also had S on the morning of the wedding. Michelle had even organised and paid for John's stag night, and John paid for her flight and hotel when she came for the wedding. On the 24th of July 1991, police searched Michelle's room at the Churchill Clinic, where they found a diary in which she recorded her daily thoughts. One extract stood out to the police. My dream solution would be for Alison to disappear, as if she never existed. The police questioned her, and when asked if she knew if John had any extramarital affairs, she did not disclose hers and instead claimed he had affairs with other women. She claimed that she did not really know John or Alison and had certainly never been to the flat before. This was later found to be a lie. When she entered the flat with John, Michelle picked up Alison, meaning that any forensic evidence on the body that linked Alison to Michelle could now be explained by this action. Police believe that this was intentional. However, fingerprints from Michelle and her 18-year-old sister Lisa were found on the inside of the front door. This was despite the fact Lisa claimed to have never been to the flat, which further incriminated the sisters, who had supposedly been together all that afternoon. On the 7th of August 1991, the Taylor sisters were arrested on suspicion of murder. Michelle initially complied in interviews and discussed her relationship with John openly. When asked how she felt about Alison, she responded, "When you see a person and you don't see the other person with them, it doesn't really enter your head. So you still feel like your boyfriend and girlfriend and there's no one else there." Police believe Michelle had killed Alison as she knew she and John were about to move to Ireland to start a family together, and she wanted John to herself. Lisa Taylor answered no comment to every question asked of her in interviews. Michelle and Lisa Taylor were brought to trial at the Old Bailey in 1992. Police developed a case built on witness evidence, diary entries, and what was presented as forensic material such as bloodstains on a jacket, Michelle's diary, including a line interpreted by prosecution as expressing a wish that Alison disappeared, which prosecutors used to suggest motive. The sisters were convicted at trial. On appeal, the sisters successfully challenged their convictions. It emerged that police had failed to disclose material evidence that could have undermined key witness accounts, and that aspects of the forensic and eyewitness case were less secure than presented at trial. The Court of Appeal quashed the convictions, and the judges criticised how press coverage may have affected the original trial, commenting that tabloid reporting had likely influenced the jury. Lisa and Michelle Taylor's prosecutions and later release illustrate how complex criminal cases can be shaped as much by evidence quality and police procedure as by media storytelling. Their case remains a cautionary example of the consequences when investigative failures and intense publicity intersect in a murder trial. The Taylor sisters have since married and have their own children and have started new lives. John also remarried and has children. In September 2000, the Metropolitan Police began an 18-month reinvestigation into Alison's murder. No new evidence or suspects were found, and it was decided to no longer investigate the case as no more could be done. In 2005, the law on double jeopardy was changed in England and Wales, allowing individuals in certain circumstances to be retried for crimes after a previous acquittal. The Blackmore family hoped that the Taylors could be retried for their daughter's murder, but the police informed them that this could not happen without any new evidence materialising. Now we move on to inmate Sara Thornton. Sara Thornton lived with her husband Malcolm, who was described at trial and in campaigning accounts as a violent alcoholic who assaulted her and threatened her and her daughter. Sara sought help from medical and social services during the relationship and had contacted the police on multiple occasions. Malcolm was due to appear in court on an assault charge 10 days after the fatal incident. On the 12th of June 1989, Malcolm Thornton died after being stabbed at the couple's home. Sara did not deny causing his death, but claimed the killing occurred during an argument and in the context of long-term physical and psychological abuse. Prosecutors argued at trial that the act was committed for financial gain, while Sara and her supporters argued it was a response to sustained violence and threats. In February 1990, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, a conviction that galvanised campaigning groups and widespread public debate about battered woman defences. The case attracted sustained campaigning by women's organisations and legal advocates, who argued that the courts had failed to take adequate account of the effect of prolonged domestic abuse on victims' behaviour and decisions. Following persistent public pressure and legal review, Sara's conviction was revisited. In a retrial at Oxford Crown Court in 1996, the jury convicted her of the lesser charge of manslaughter rather than murder, and she was released from custody. The retrial and the changed verdict did not produce a single legal formula for all similar cases, but it did force courts, lawyers and policy makers to grapple more honestly with how to handle cases in which long-term domestic violence is a central factor. Now we look at Sally Clark, who was an English solicitor who was wrongfully convicted of the murder of her 2 infant sons. Sally's first son died in December 1996, a few weeks after birth, and her second son died in January 1998 in similar circumstances. The defence argued both deaths were cases of sudden infant death syndrome, but a sequence of investigative, medical and court errors led to her arrest and trial for murder. Central to the prosecution's case was expert testimony from paediatrician Roy Meadow, who gave a low probability for 2 SIDS deaths in one affluent family, often quoted as 1 in 73 million. That statistical claim was presented to jurors as powerful evidence of murderous intent, yet it was flawed and misused. Meadows' approach treated dependent events as independent and ignored important medical context. During reveal and appeal processes, it emerged that important medical evidence had not been disclosed at trial. Fresh expert analysis showed that one of the babies had been suffering from an overwhelming infection at the time of death, a fact unavailable to the defence during the original proceedings. The Criminal Cases Review Commission found that this and other failings created a real possibility that the convictions were unsafe. Sally Clark's convictions were eventually overturned on appeal, but the personal and social costs were devastating. The case prompted legal and professional reforms and increased scrutiny of expert evidence in criminal trials. Lastly, we look at Sharon Louise Carr, who was born in December 1979. She is a Belize-born woman convicted in 1997 for the 1992 murder of 18-year-old Katie Ratcliffe in Camberley, Surrey. She is notable for being the youngest female murderer to be sentenced in modern UK legal history, having committed the killing when she was just 12 years old. Accounts of her upbringing describe a difficult home environment, poverty and family instability. Commentators and case summaries link these factors to a troubled childhood, but stress that definitive causal links to her later behaviour are not established in public records. On the 7th of June 1992, Katie was attacked as she walked home from a nightclub in Camberley. She later passed away of her injuries. The attack was apparently random, and the case went unsolved for a period until later events connected Carr to the crime. Carr came to police attention in 1994 after an unrelated violent incident at school in which she attacked another pupil. During subsequent questioning and investigation, she boasted to peers about the earlier murder, which together with forensic and witness evidence led to her arrest and charge for Katie's killing. Charged as a juvenile, Carr stood trial as an adolescent in March 1997. She was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation and minimum tariff of 14 years, later adjusted. While imprisoned, Carr has been reported as exhibiting violent and challenging behaviour and has been implicated in further assaults or attempts while in custody. Authorities have assessed her risk and she has been held in secure conditions, reporting on later attacks, and her containment continues to feed debate about managing dangerous juveniles in detention. But now let's look at the second prison and its inmates. Prison Blantyre House was a Category C/D resettlement prison for adult men located on the outskirts of Kent. It operated as part of Her Majesty's Prison Service and was known for focusing on preparing long-term prisoners for release and community reintegration. The site began life as a country house that later became a training farm run by James Fegan, and in April 1954 it was converted by the prison services into a detention centre youth offenders institution for older boys and young men serving short sentences. In 1991, the establishment was reclassified and reopened as an adult prison, marking a shift towards housing and preparing longer-term inmates for the end of their sentences. It developed a distinct identity as a resettlement facility. Prisoners were typically transferred there in the final years of long sentences to access education, work placements, and a regime designed to increase independence before release. Education often played a central role in the first months of a prisoner's stay, with opportunities to continue studying externally and to take part in community-facing programs intended to reduce reoffending. What set the house apart was the emphasis on normalising daily life and building practical skills. Staff-prisoner interactions, training placements, and shared communal routines were used to create a less institutional atmosphere and to model the responsibilities expected in the community. Contemporary accounts from staff and inspectors described the prison as relatively progressive in its approach, when visits and inspections often noting the value of its rehabilitative focus. Despite its rehabilitative mission, Blantyre House's history included governance and security controversies that attracted parliamentary attention. A notable incident in 2001 involved the circumstances of searches and the removal of the governor, prompting debate in the House of Lords about the prison's record and oversight. The prison closed in January 2016 for refurbishment and remained unused for operational purposes in subsequent years, though the Ministry of Justice indicated the site remained available and might be repurposed, for example, as a training facility. Now, with the prison history done, let's get into some of its former inmates, starting with Erwin James. Erwin James was a British former convict who transformed his life behind bars into a high-profile career as a journalist and campaigner on prison reform and education. He wrote the long-running Guardian column A Life Inside while still incarcerated, and after release continued to write, edit and campaign on criminal justice issues. James had a deeply troubled childhood, marked by school exclusion, truancy and early offending, receiving his first conviction shortly after his 11th birthday and accumulating frequent convictions through adolescence and early adulthood. Born Erwin Monaghan in Somerset, England, to Scottish parents. His mother died in a car crash when he was 7. He was separated from his sister when she was 20 months old. Following the crash, his grieving father turned to alcohol and became a violent drunk, taking his troubles out on his subsequent partners and on the young Erwin. Erwin, like I said, committed his first crime at 11 years old, breaking into a sweet shop. He eventually accumulated 53 criminal convictions. By his late 20s, he faced trial for double murder and was serving a life sentence, a period that initiated profound personal change. Erwin and his co-defendant William Ross, whom he had met in a squat in London, were convicted of murdering theatrical agent Greville Hallam and solicitor Angus Coachran in 1982. Hallam was found with his life taken in his home in London. Coachran was murdered 3 months later after being mugged. Following the murders, Erwin fled to France and joined the French Foreign Legion. The judge that was proceeding over the case described Erwin as brutal, vicious and callous, and sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 14 years, subsequently increased to 25 years by the Home Secretary. Ross was also sentenced to life imprisonment. He was released from prison to a hostel in March 2014. While Erwin was serving his sentence at Wakefield and other prisons, he began engaging with education and psychological support, notably through the encouragement of a prison psychologist, which led him to enroll in classes and discover reading and writing as transformative tools. Education became central to his rehabilitation, giving him intellectual confidence and a new sense of purpose. In 1998, James began writing the Guardian column A Life Inside, the first regular national press column written from within a British prison. It brought rare, sustained inside testimony about prison life to a wide audience and established him as an authoritative voice on penal policy. He authored memoirs including Redeemable and A Life Inside, charting his journey from crime and violence to reflection, remorse and practical proposals for reform. James was released in August 2004 after serving roughly 20 years of a life sentence and subsequently continued journalism, editing, including work with Inside Time and charity work focused on prisoners, ex-offenders and education in custody. His writing and public appearances helped shift public conversation about rehabilitation, prison education and the possibility of change, while also provoking complex debate about responsibility, remorse and victimhood. Next we look at Winston Silcott. Winston Silcott is a British man whose wrongful conviction for the murder of police constable Keith Blakelock during the Broadwater farm riot in North London became one of the most prominent miscarriages of justice in recent UK history. Silcott was born in 1959 to Caribbean parents and grew up in a social and political climate marked by racial tension and strained relations between some black communities and the Metropolitan Police. Tensions in Tottenham had been building through the 1980s, influenced by stop and search practices, policing styles and economic marginalisation, and high-profile deaths in custody that inflamed community anger. On the night of the 6th of October 1985, rioting erupted on the Broadwater Farm estate following the death of Cynthia Jarrett during a police search and the earlier killing of PC Derek Wyatt in Tottenham. During the unrest, PC Keith Blakelock was killed. In the chaotic aftermath, 3 men, Winston Silcott, Mark Braithwaite and Engin Raghip, were arrested and later convicted. The prosecutions rested heavily on statements obtained during repeated interviews and on contested identifications and allegations that later proved deeply problematic. Silcott and the other 2 men were convicted in 1987. Reviews and scientific testing revealed serious flaws. Evidence suggested that confessions had been fabricated or coerced and that interview procedures had been misapplied. Their convictions were quashed by the Court of Appeal on the 25th of November 1991, after forensic and procedural re-evaluation undermined the reliability of the original case against them. Following the overturned convictions, Silcott brought civil claims against the Metropolitan Police. He received initial compensation for wrongful conviction and later a larger out-of-court settlement reported as £50,000 for malicious prosecution. Despite legal redress, public and media reaction remained polarised. Sections of the press continued to portray Silcott negatively, illustrating how reputational harm can persist long after legal exoneration. And our last inmate we look at is Satpal Ram, a British man of South Asian descent who was involved in a violent incident at a Bengali restaurant in Birmingham in November 1986. During an altercation that began after a dispute over music, Ram was attacked by a group of men. He later said he stabbed one attacker, Clark Pierce, after being assaulted with a broken bottle and suffering serious injuries. Ram was arrested and tried for murder in 1987. He was convicted and received a life sentence. The prosecution maintained that the stabbing caused Pierce's death, while Ram and his supporters argued the act had been in self-defense during a racially charged violent attack. The case attracted sustained public attention. Supporters, including musicians and anti-racist campaigners, argued that Ram had been the victim of a racist assault and that his conviction and later treatment in the criminal justice system represented a miscarriage of justice. Campaigners emphasized failings in how evidence, witness testimony, and racial context were handled at trial and in prison procedures. Ram was released from Blantyre House on parole in June 2002. His initial release, as recommended by the parole board in 2000, was overturned by the Home Secretary at the time, Jack Straw. His release in 2002 resulted from a European Court of Human Rights ruling, which stated that the government executives, such as the Home Secretary, had no right to overrule a decision of a parole board. And that concludes our video today. As always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.